Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us after our little break last weekend for our Sunday Talks within the Nine-Sided Circle. I'm one of your two hosts, Noor Kyle.
And I'm the other one of your two hosts, Mushtaq Ali.
And Mushtaq, speaking of hosting, would you make me a co-host, please?
Oh, if I must. There you go. I knew I was
Perfect.
forgetting something.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you. Okay, so once again, thanks for joining us. If you missed us last week, don't worry. We didn't have a meeting last week, and we are picking right back where we left off the week before with tonight's talk, which is the fourth in our four-parter about the souls. We're talking about the four souls and how those are in dialogue with some of the concepts from the fourth way tradition. And before we roll into that, do we have any announcements we need to make?
Nothing comes to mind off the top of my head.
Yeah, nothing official right now, so I think we'll just keep it simple, and eventually we'll be talking about the in-person retreat within the next couple weeks. I think I'm going to be posting up some informational links about that so that people can get the ball rolling on registration. But keep in mind that I am recovering from surgery, so it's taking me a little bit of time to get the ball rolling on that. But we have not forgotten about you all who are interested. Do not worry. In the meantime, thank you for joining us, whether you're here live or watching on the replay on YouTube. We are so happy to have you. And the number one way you can support us right off the bat is to do the whole like, comment, subscribe thing, and leave a comment if you're feeling up for it. We definitely appreciate those, especially when people ask thoughtful questions or have cool things to share about their own experiences or thoughts about what we discussed in the talk that session, whatever it might be. Thank you so much for sharing. And also, 'tis the season. If you feel so called, we absolutely do welcome donations, especially at this time of year when our operating costs tend to pick up. We have to do our yearly operating stuff where we pay for our Zoom thing and this, that, and the other thing. And to keep our work going, we always appreciate when people are eager, willing, and able to pitch in. Even the littlest bit, it does make a difference. So in advance, thank you so much for your support. Anything I need to add, Mushtaq?
Not that I can think of. We
Yeah.
like you all.
Yay. We do. We are so happy that you're here with us. So thank you. All right. So this evening, talking about that fourth soul. So, as we have discussed before, there are many ways to call this soul by name, but we will always have to remember that this is what we call the soul of souls. Al Ruhani or Al Ruhani-Ruh. What else? What are the other names, Mushtaq? And I'm trying to get my mouth around these syllables is always a little bit challenging. So
Yeah.
thank you for indulging me.
Yeah. That's good enough. This is at a point where it's hard to describe anyway. If you run the phrase that we use through my Arabic English dictionary, it says spirituality, which I always found interesting.
So is this, we could call
This is
this a
the
spiritual
spiritual
soul.
soul. Yeah.
Yeah.
What this is what Gurdjieff called the higher intellectual center. And like the higher emotional center, it is something that is fully formed within human beings, but completely disconnected in most cases until you build the bridge to it. And therefore, completely asleep or identified with the sleep of the machine. So, tell me, Noor, what is the spiritual soul?
Whew, what is the spiritual soul? Well, we've talked previously about how working on the foundational aspects of being, we talked about the quote unquote lower centers, right? Those are not necessarily lower so much as foundational, so that you can work on these quote higher centers, such as the Ruhani-Ruh, the higher intellectual center, in a way that allows for intentional connection as opposed to accidental connection, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's something we talked a lot about last week or 2 weeks ago with the higher emotional center in particular. But this time we're talking about the higher intellectual center. So this is kind of the obviously the intellectual faculty, the mental faculty, but it is something different from what we consider the foundational mental faculty. So this is, as we've said, there's something spiritual about this center. This is not just, intellectualizing and meditation and all of those things we've come to consider corollaries or synonyms for using the intellect and using intelligence. This is about something that goes even deeper than using the brain like a calculator, for instance. This is more about inspiration, isn't it, Mushtaq?
Yes. And so we've talked in the past about the model of the ray of creation and how it starts at 0 and ends up for us in this particular ray at 96. And what these numbers represent is the number of constraints upon being. So when you were at the level of 96, you're basically entirely mechanical. You're a stimulus response. You are not really even capable of free will. You're as crystallized as you can get, is sedimented even. As you move up the ray of creation, there are fewer and fewer constraints upon you. And at the in our last talk, talking about the higher emotional center, that center, when it is active, has only 12 laws, they say, that are active on you. With this higher intellectual center, there are only 6. You're at the level of 6 laws, which is as high as you can get being just in this physical plane. 3 laws is like beyond us in a certain sense. Maybe Al-Khidr and Babaji and all of these wild immortal masters, they may operate there, but for the rest of us who are just plain folks, we're looking at this is what we can aspire to while on this planet in these bodies. Just to check, do I need to do any more explanation on this for you guys? Kitav, you look like you have a thought.
Yes, I saw some contemplation going on there.
Yeah, there's a question, but it's about the ray of creation. Maybe I'll ask it offline later. I don't want to digress the.
Oh, no, go ahead.
It's okay, because a lot of people may have that same question while watching. So.
I know that not everybody hangs on our every video, surprisingly. So they might have missed the ones on this. So go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah. So the question that I had, you mentioned that the ray that we are in, that goes all the way up to 96. So the question I had is, is there a possibility of rays that go even grosser than 96?
They say so, yeah, but just not on ours, which is the only one that we're worried about because this is where we live. There may be ones that are twice that. But I don't know how to get to them, and I have no reason to want to get to something that's that sedimented. I'm trying to go in the other direction.
Yeah.
So the thing to remember is the higher the number on the ray of creation, which goes from 0 to 3 to 6 to 12, 24, 48, 96. The higher the number, the more mechanical you are, or the more mechanical nature you are subject to. So we are working to break that.
Yeah, and we can also remember that this is a heuristic, meaning that it's a model, it's a simplification that's meant to serve a practical purpose.
You mean that this is not actually objective truth, written in stone and handed down by the gods?
I
Are you
personally would
sure?
argue no, yeah, but
Yeah, these are all models, and our models are going to be different than some of the other models. Most of the people who are at all familiar with this are either familiar with the Sufi model or the Gurdjieff model. And what we are doing is sort of a hodgepodge of those two models with some other stuff thrown in that makes it easier for me to understand. And with any luck, it'll be easier for other people to understand.
And I'm sure I'll make the stew my own in due time. So
yeah,
we can have fun with it as long as it's useful. Yeah.
Yep. So what do you get when you get the higher head center open? Any ideas?
Jonathan, sure.
Yeah, I have. Yeah, this was going to be a question of mine.
Sure.
Our examples like Einstein's theory of relativity, or some of these great musical artists and compositions, are they an example of this center being made contact with?
Some, but not all. The ones who can do great symbolic work are more likely to have touched on this. And you'll find that, I mean, of the composers in the West that may have touched upon this, maybe Bach, perhaps Mozart occasionally. Bach is more, to me, feels more likely to touch this than not. In the East, I have heard Indian compositions, traditional Carnatic music, especially, that will touch upon this because as you listen to it, it creates an entire symbol system inside of you at a very deep level that allows you to hear the music in a way that is more than just listening with your ears.
Yeah, so this is music that has been calculated using the symbols of musical theory and math to come out with the composition, rather than I'm contacting something emotional within me, and this music feels like what is expressing not that, it's more
Not that.
symbolic.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's why I say Bach in Western music, because his music is so mathematically perfect. You know, you can take a Bach piece and play it forward and then play it backwards, turn it upside down and play it that way, and it's all beautiful music. That's one of the weird and enjoyable things about it. I love listening to Bach backwards.
No, I killed Paul or anything like that in there. I buried Paul.
No.
Not that time. Yep.
And for those of you on the forums, I'm probably going to dig up, there's a couple of good examples of Bach's mathematical perfection in his music, and I'll dig it up and you guys can listen to it.
Kitav, I saw you unmuted. Did you have a thought?
A question actually. Mushra, could you elaborate what you mentioned, which is, let's say, when you listen to such music, it creates a symbol system inside of you, which allows you to listen with more than the ears, right? So what exactly is a symbol system? How exactly can you listen to it with beyond the ears?
This is a little bit like pornography. I can't define it, but I know it when I see it, kind of thing. For me, it's very hard to describe this. How to say? My experience of it is I mean, yes, there could be feelings involved. There could be emotion that is brought up, but above that, there is, and this gets into what the higher head center, higher intellectual center is. There is a form of meta program within it that is above just the notes, that create a you know what a hologram is? Yeah, so you get a hologram by having an object and hitting it with two laser beams, one of which is a reference beam. And then that creates a pattern on a photographic film. And if you look at the pattern, it looks like just circles and spirals and stuff. And if you take that reference beam and you hit the film with it, what happens is that you get a three-dimensional image that you can kind of walk around of the object. And for me, this kind of music is that interference pattern that creates a higher order object for people. Does that make sense, or am I completely blithering at this point?
I'm sort of getting the idea of what it might mean. So let's say if I think about music, right? The music will have notes, and now I'm talking about instrumental music, maybe not the vocals, right? So it will have specific notes. But then you're saying there's something beyond those notes, right? So it could maybe be the pattern in the notes, right? Or how the notes are arranged.
Yeah.
It could
the
be
notes would be the reference beam. So as the notes are played against this interference pattern, it creates this higher level image. At this point, what I'm saying is not real. It's just, this is how I experience. This is the best way I can talk about it. Talk about an experience that is not really verbal. So the the music, and music is a really good example of this. The music creates a hologram when it is listened to correctly. And the hologram is not out in the world, it's inside your own mind. Now, of what possible use is this? Yeah.
Sure, he's like, yes, please, can we get to that?
So, another way to think of the higher intellectual center is that it is your metaprogramming center. You understand the idea of metaprogramming?
I think that's something we need to unpack, because even I did some research and I find this concept a little bit hard to talk about.
Metaprogramming is, so you have programs. We can use the computer or the mind. The mind has conditioned behaviors. Those are programs. You put a stimulus in, you get a response back.
And we all have that going on.
We all got that. Yeah, I've never met a human being that does not have this. And it's really easy to demonstrate that. And, I hate to say it, when I was young, I met a guru guy who thought that he was completely enlightened and had no stimulus response. And I walked up and I slapped him across the face. Wow, did he have a response, a reaction to that? Just utterly amazing. I can guarantee you, I would have a reaction to that. I know that I have not broken that particular programming. He thought he did. He was wrong. Doing that was stupid. I have to admit, I was young. I was stupid. I like to think I've grown out of my stupidity, at least to a certain extent. But, we all have that. We need it. We must have it in order to survive. We have to have some really nice programs that do things like tell us to eat when we're hungry and sleep when we're tired and things like that.
Yeah, because these things aren't just social, they're also instinctive, right?
Yeah. And it's right down in the moving center.
Yep.
So, metaprogramming are the programs that can reprogram the programs. Higher order programming. This is where the artificial intelligence starts teaching itself in a computer, starts rewriting its own operating system. And that's what we have with the higher intellectual center. With the higher intellectual center, we can rewrite our operating system, which is why God, in its infinite wisdom, has arranged for us to not get our hands on it until we are something more than entirely dense and stupid, because we would start rewriting all sorts of crazy shit. And we actually see that every day here in America, because we see people trying to rewrite their programs according to not their highest nature, but according to whatever their ego wants. And you don't get, you don't get access to this until you have your ego under some sort of control.
So is this different on any particular level compared to what we talked about a couple weeks ago with the crystallization of a higher emotional center that is not quite healthy, not quite mature?
Yeah, this is different than that, because you cannot get to this unless your higher emotional center is healthy and crystallized properly. You cannot get to this.
So it's basically not even doable then until you've had that.
Yeah, until you've done the work. And that's one of the reasons that it is so hard to talk about this, because you don't get a lot of words for this. You don't get a lot of people who have gotten here. Most of us are lucky if we have a halfway decent lower emotional and intellectual center working.
Mm-hmm.
And lots of people like to think that they're here, and they ain't.
So what might it look like so people can kind of wrap their heads around this more and more? What does it look like when someone has an unhealthy idea about what this center is like and has a misconception that they're here?
You know, that high-priced group right down the road from us?
Yeah, it's like a spiritually flavored, self-helpy,
Yeah,
new
love,
agey,
manifestation,
Silicon
whatever.
Valley weirdness. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what it looks like today, here.
Okay.
In different places, it looks like different things. This is in India, you have these guys who are, they call them God men oftentimes, who say, you know, I'm the enlightened being. What's his name? The weird guy who dresses up like Shiva.
Oh my
And
gosh.
yeah, that idiot. That's what it looks like when it's gone haywire. Yeah. And that dude is bad medicine. But we don't say bad things about people like that.
So it's dangerous then. I mean, that's not even
Yeah,
slanderous
but
to say, so much as fact.
yeah, and there is a safety mechanism that keeps you from getting access to this until you have done the work. And if you haven't done the work, if you haven't crystallized your higher emotional center correctly, you don't get there. And you
So,
get this crazy stuff instead.
yeah, so that's like pretend. That's not
Yeah.
the higher center at work.
Yeah,
Truth.
that is not the higher center at work. That is pretend crazy shit.
Mm-hmm. At best, we can say it's aspirational.
No, we can't even say that.
Yeah,
We can say it's crazy. It's
okay.
yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I hate to be blunt about it, but yeah, I might as well be. You know, we're small fries. Nobody listens to us in comparison to these guys with the big names and girls with the big names. There are girls with big names too. And what happens is when the higher emotional center is wrongly crystallized, you get lost in these fantasies. You think you're there, you're halfway up the mountain, and you think you've made it the whole way. And so you set up camp on a nice little ledge on the cliff face and start telling everybody that this is where you need to stop. What they don't realize is that the mountain is infinite. You ain't never going to get to the top. The trick is continue the journey. I remember the first time I discovered that, and this was with real mountains. I was going up probably 14 years old, hiking up a switchback. Switchback is a trail that goes back and forth up the mountain like this. It takes a long time to get up to the top. And I'm looking at there and I'm looking there and I'm going, I'm almost there. I'm almost there. I'm almost there. And I get to where I thought was the top. And it was literally about halfway up. And back was another rise in the mountain and another set of switchbacks. And I'm sitting there going, oh, poor me. And all the mountains are like that. The story that we like to tell ourselves is that we can get somewhere. And we don't get somewhere. We continue the journey. The journey starts with your first breath, and it doesn't end until your last breath. And if you think that there's some place where you've arrived and you ain't dead, you're fooling yourself.
So this is kind of one of the big traps, particularly of the higher emotional center, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's moving forward and not getting stuck there, and making sure that that stage of development is putting you in a position of well-being and health and relative saneness.
Yeah, and relative saneness is something you got to watch out for, because and this is where things get a little bit wacky, because when you can reprogram yourself, when you can rewrite your programs, and you don't have some checks and balances to make sure that all of the safety features have been added, you can go off in some weird directions.
Yeah. So
And John Lilly was really interested in this, and he almost killed himself a few times doing some serious metaprogramming.
We'll get into John Lilly, because I think that's a worthwhile direction. But Jonathan, I saw you unmuted shortly before.
Yes. Well, looking at the image behind Mushtaq there, when I look at that, I see it as, I mean, it has artistic, it stimulates me in an artistic way. Like it's, and I mean, I know you made that image.
Yeah.
So you mean maybe you chose to light it in that way because it emotionally, if it was pretty, or you wanted to express some kind of, you wanted to express something in that art form. But could it be that if one was contacting the Ruhani-Ruh, one could pick an image of a cloud as a symbol, that it would symbolize something, or the mast of a ship would symbolize something, or the water would symbolize something, and that you could be composing something meaningful that have a message within it, that it's not an emotional artistic expression, but something much more, and it might include an emotional aspect, but it's done in a kind of a moving center way, but with symbols.
Now, with the picture behind me, and this is a good example because I used an AI to generate the basics of this picture. So I said to this program, give me volumetric lighting behind, and that's why the clouds have that particular kind of light. And I gave it certain parameters for the water, certain parameters for the boats, and then I let it draw out the basics. And then I went in afterwards in Photoshop and did the final touching. So where are we? That mountain right there was not in the original, but I wanted to have some work behind me. And so it's the meta programming was first suggesting to the computer how I wanted it to generate the image, and then going in finally and tweaking and playing around with it so that I could get everything the way I wanted. And it's sort of like that. So that's why the sails look like they've been beat to shit. These boats have definitely been in a storm recently. Some of the sails are torn, and I wanted that feeling of something has happened. And whatever it was in the past, but here in the future, we're dealing with that. Does that make sense?
It allows me to get closer.
Yeah, good.
So speaking of metaprogramming and programming and stuff, you were talking about John Lilly briefly.
Yep. Brilliant mind. Very, very interesting character. I consider that he went off the deep end with some of this stuff. He did a lot of early LSD research. He was the guy who basically invented the flotation tank, the sensory deprivation tank. And he would take large amounts of LSD and float in the tank and see what happened. He was an MD. He was involved in dolphin studies and all sorts of crazy stuff. And he really got into the consciousness stuff, and he started experimenting with some interesting substances. Many of, I mean, he was found floating face down in his pool once after doing just a little bit too much ketamine. And
Gary.
yeah, he was a good example of not having his higher emotional center correctly crystallized, having jumped his magnetic center and trying to push through and never quite making it. In my opinion, there are some people who worship the ground that the guy walks on, but though I really appreciate his work as a pioneer, I am not one of the people who thinks that he found out the good stuff. So, how can you use this in your daily life? The answer is you can't. You ain't nowhere near there yet. Go through the first steps. Work on your the Jismani-Ruh and the Sahrani-Ruh. Get those really well together. When your Sahrani-Ruh is well developed, then you can make the jump to the higher emotional center, the Sultani-Ruh. Yeah. And when that is crystallized properly, then, and only then, can you safely and usefully work on the Ruhan-iRuh. That's no fun, is it?
So why is it called the spiritual center, Mushtaq? Or the
spiritual soul?
Yeah.
Because it is as close as we can get to the one while being just in this body. When you have only 6 laws constraining you, I mean, people who have 6 laws constraining them, according to what I've heard, are people like Jesus, like Al-Hidr, like Babaji. You know, these people who have pretty much transcended everything and are just sticking around to play with the universe and to help out stupid hairless monkeys.
Because there's something about breaking limits at this stage, isn't there? Like, that's kind of the appeal to this domain, is that so much of it is about, as we're talking about programming and metaprogramming, what that really means is challenging the limitations that you placed on yourself or that society has placed on you, or that your instincts have put upon you, and moving beyond those in meaningful ways, essentially.
Yep.
But
And go ahead.
What I was going to say is that is why building a foundation of being grounded and being able to challenge those limitations in a way that isn't just going to spin you out into total checking out and incoherence within your own life and within your relationships with the world around you.
Yeah. And there's some cautionary tales about this that I don't remember the name of the movie, but it was I'm pretty sure a British movie, 1940s, early 1950s, maybe, about this guy who was given ultimate power. A little bit like that. I don't remember the name of that movie. Anyway, this is the original. And so here is this guy, and he's given ultimate power. And what he discovers that anything he wills to happen will happen. You know, he basically is God on earth. He says, die, and somebody will die. And he, at first, is very cautious and experiments with it, but he still has his ego. His ego. Bruce Almighty was the modern version of this.
Thanks, Katav. That's such a great, like, everyday example so that people can connect with this.
Yeah, but this was much more serious. And it ends up with him in a fit of pique, stopping the earth from spinning. What he failed to realize, though, is that he had not stopped the laws of motion. And so the moment the earth stopped, everything on it kept on going. And the entire planet was tearing itself apart. And he realized that he had destroyed everything just because of his own egotism. And of course, then he used his last will to put everything back the way it was and to get rid of his power so he would be a normal person again. But it was a pretty poignant movie. And I was very young when I saw this, and it stuck with me. It's like, it was a cautionary tale. And the moral of the story is, if you have ultimate power and your ego, you're going to destroy the world, one way or the other. And we see this over and over and over again. Think about Jim Jones. He ended up with some ultimate power, right? He had power over hundreds of people. He controlled their lives. His word was the law of the universe. And what did he do? He killed them all. Because his ego would not allow them to live.
So there's a sense of being able to fake this kind of power to to trick people and yourself into believing you have it and doing dangerous things with that.
Yep.
It is different from actually having that. Yes.
And some of these folks, I'm pretty sure that Jim Jones had a wrongly crystallized higher emotional center, just from watching him work on people. Same with the crazy guy with the going off with the Hale-Bopp comet, who got all of his followers to kill themselves so that they could go off with the comet.
So there was no going further than that.
There was no, they were stuck there. They could not evolve into the actual higher intellectual center.
Yeah. And here's the thing, though, we can do things that challenge our limitations even without being at the level of the Ruhan-iRuh, but these are more day-to-day life things.
Yeah, this
like
is not
habit breaking,
walking on water kind of stuff.
Yeah. So this is not to say that you need to go this deep to change some things about your life that have been deeply problematic for you.
No, as a matter of fact, you have to change the things about your life that have been
Get
deeply
there.
problematic, even to begin to hope to get
Yeah,
there.
that's what I wanted to get at. Yes.
Yeah. This is the ultimate goal, in a certain sense, is to be able to work from this center. And this requires years of work on yourself. And it doesn't matter if you get there or not, as long as you're doing the work and progressing.
I was going to say, if you want it that bad, you're not going to get it, right?
Yeah.
Because that's part of the
egotism
ego
that you have to give up.
Right. Mm-hmm. So if you ever get there, it's going to be more like tripping into it because you're committed to doing the work.
Yeah. It will be one of those things where one day you notice that you've been there for a couple of years and you go, oh, okay. And then you go make breakfast. Or so they say. I don't know. I don't know nothing.
I don't know either. I mean, we can theorize about this all evening long, but ultimately we kind of have to just trust the process, don't we?
Yeah. So, Cherie, what do you think?
Too much. I'm grappling with all of this, and I'm wondering that, are we given little tests of it in our daily life? Because this is how we're going to work. We're not going to work on this, whether we're leading a cult or something. We're just the daily life stuff. That's what I'm interested in, to be able to use our awareness to notice our certain programming that we're happily living by because it's keeping everything peaceful, and then something challenges it. And being awake enough to say, you know what? This no longer works this way, to think this way, to make decisions in this way. So using that to challenge what is a really ingrained programming of the culture or the family where you are, and knowing that standing up to that challenge is that test of whether we are using our spiritual soul. And you only get a little taste of it every time. Sometimes you can step up and say, this is no good anymore. And other times you will continue to suffer the programming until you're ready to let it go.
Yeah. And you bring up something very important that I haven't mentioned yet, which is there is this rule, which you all may have heard somewhere or another. It comes from the Emerald Tablet, which says, that which is above is like that which is below, and that which is below is like that which is above. As above, so below. So what we do working with our moving center, our emotional center, and our intellectual center is a mirror and a shadow of what we can do with our higher centers. And that's how we practice it. So even if we only use our regular intellectual center to do some programming on our reprogramming on ourselves, we are practicing for the higher stuff.
So that's what you're talking about, sure.
Yeah.
I mean, that's another way of describing what you're talking about.
Yeah, and thank you for that, because that actually is easier to say than what I was trying to say.
What? What are we talking about? Because it is not one gigantic leap from one to the other. There's this progression
Yeah.
in our experience of life. to be able to get that little taste, and we get another little taste and another little taste, to be able to keep getting stronger, to challenge those who wish to keep us within a programming, because those around us do not want to be challenged, want us to keep maintaining the status quo. But if we're working on being awake, we are constantly challenging the status quo.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Which is why people like to burn you at the stake if you talk too much. Because the status quo does not want to be challenged.
So the stake, the modern stake, is the trolling we're getting on social media and so forth. If you have an opinion about something, if you say something and you think, I can't actually stand for that, that is the big challenge for a modern human at the moment, because you are destroyed on an emotional, intellectual level. And unless you have that strength within you to say, no, I don't stand for that, that's not real.
Yeah. And that's pure primate behavior. What we see in social media, if you were to watch a few Jane Goodall documentaries of her hanging out with the chimpanzees, you would see that exact behavior in a chimpanzee troop. If you get a chimp that does not act appropriate to his position in the troop, everybody else flings mud at him, throws sticks at him, bites him, beats him up until he either conforms or dies.
So we actually not conform.
Say that again, Sheree.
So we have to try not to conform and not die at the same time.
Yeah.
The paradox, right?
Die to the old programming.
Yeah, and this is why Gurdjieff called this the way of the sly man, or as I like to say, the way of the sly human. Because we must sneak past them.
This is not a martyrdom in progress, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, I am of the philosophy that General Patton espoused in World War II when talking to the troops. He said, "It is not your job to die for your country. It is your job to help the other guy die for his country." And that's kind of where I'm at. I have no need to be a martyr, nor has no need to be a martyr. You guys, I hope, have no need to be a martyr. Let the stupid people be martyrs. And there will be plenty of them. There will be more Jonestowns. There will be more people going up in the spaceships. There will be more groups that are completely lost in these illusions of enlightenment.
And yeah, this is the warning, but they can't be made to heed that warning.
Nope.
Unless it really lands for them in a genuine way.
Yeah. And for every group like this one that says, you know, you could wake up, there are 1,000 that say, no, it's okay. Go to sleep. Have a nice dream. Yeah.
Well,
remember what? Say again?
That's why I turn up, because this is like, I had to organize myself to get to this time slot to try and listen to the talks. And I'm thinking, I don't know what they're talking about. And then really I have to sit down and get into it. And I think, okay, I don't think like that. You know, so that if I'm not prepared to get poked by the group, then I wouldn't be prepared to grow.
This is true. And you
So-
can take heart in the fact that we don't know what we're talking about either.
Yeah, we're all trying to figure it out together, but you guys know things and understand the terminology and everything is your unique way of communicating this information. And so for me, it's being in an unknown space of this, which is actually very challenging, but I'm still here.
You're happy you're here. Yes. And thanks for putting up with us. Because, I mean, every week I'm learning something new too. And there are always words that I have to take time to digest or outright disagree with and prefer not to use because I don't feel like they convey the nuance that I might wish to convey. But we try to rise to that kind of challenge every single week. So if people have questions about the terminology that we use, I mean, we may not be able to give a succinct, perfect answer, and we may not be able to answer every single question that arises in that regard. But if people are struggling with terminologies, I invite them to be brave enough to ask.
Yeah, and if we don't know, we'll make up something that sounds plausible.
Yeah. Or we'll direct to a resource that might be useful.
Yeah.
If we don't have the bandwidth to give the answer ourselves. So hopefully people will take us up on that invitation.
Yeah. Surprisingly, we don't have all the answers.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's something that frustrates some of the people who write comments to us on this because they ask us these things about, these great lofty things. And half the time or more, my answer is, I don't know.
Yeah. And sometimes I'm like, what are they even trying to ask me? But it's important that people do that and that we all are stretched in the process. Yeah.
When I'm in doubt, I just have to tell myself, is this the most loving action I'm taking?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's hard to go wrong with that one.
Yeah, and I have, especially for myself, being fixated at 9, and I just forget that I even exist sometimes, and I sacrifice myself by doing too much and helping too many people and so forth. But then, you think, well, you need to go to bed. That's it. Yeah. No story, no reason, no nothing. You're tired. Go to bed. Just lie down. Just like, okay.
Yep.
That's it. All right. I don't understand that. Okay, lie down.
Yes. And sometimes that offers all the clarity in the world, doesn't it? Like
it really does.
Yeah. Yep. So with all of that said, thank you everyone. Do we have any last thoughts or questions?
Nah.
Yes.
Sorry, Tab, sure.
I think in the talk a couple of weeks back, you'd mentioned that this center is linked to the tree of life, like the higher emotional was linked to the tree of knowledge. Could you elaborate on that, please?
Yes. The fun
Just
questions.
when we thought we were out of here, but no, this is a good follow-up. So
yeah. So the tree of life. If you think back to in the Abrahamic tradition in Genesis, God creates the garden and he puts these 2 trees in it, and he tells Adam and Eve, you can eat of any tree, but don't eat of the fruit of this tree because surely you will die. And that was of course the tree of knowledge. And of course they do, because it was a setup. God knew that they were going to eat from the tree. He meant for them to eat from the tree. He insisted that they eat from the tree, and all of a sudden they had conscience. And then he said,
psychology there.
Yeah, and then he says, or some of his underlings say to him, let us kill man, or something like that. Let us drive him forth, because before he eats of the tree of life and becomes like us. And that's the thing, is when you are at this center, this is why I use the examples of, like Al-Khidr and Babaji, these immortal masters who have been around for centuries, because they don't need to die every time they turn around. They have reprogrammed themselves to the point where they can live at this very high level, or so they say. I mean, everybody has their opinions about these people.
Who are, not like, gender is irrelevant. It's just that we tend to have a tradition that focuses on
but if you look at the Taoist masters, I think that there's a few Taoist immortals who are female, and they would be the same ones. And in the Indian tradition, even though it tends to be slanted towards the male aspect, there are the divine yoginis who are basically the same thing. We just don't talk about them. Remember, it was actually Patanjali's mother who was the great yogi. People forget that. But so this is connected to the tree of life, because with it one can, as they say, transcend death. And that may mean death of the body, where you're bopping around like Al-Khidr at doing God's work wherever he wants you to do it, or it may just be having a true soul that allows your awareness to persist after death. Who knows? I'll let you know after I'm dead. I'll send you a postcard.
We'll report back if possible. Yeah.
But that's basically what it means. It is when you eat of that fruit, you achieve eternal life, as opposed to eternal dream.
But even in a die before you die Sufi sense, it's still got weight to it.
Yep.
Any last thoughts?
And in this story, I'm not that familiar with the story, but did Adam and Eve have the fruit from the tree of life, or what happened to that?
No, they got driven from the garden before they could munch down on the fruit of the tree of life.
Okay.
Yeah. With God's curse upon them.
So tree of life, so like the garden was a place which was sort of like an inflection point, right? If they would have had it from the tree of life, they could have gone, let's say, transcended even that. And gone higher.
Yeah, the garden was actually it was womb-like. They were there. They were not conscious in any sense of the word. They were like us, completely mechanical, no sense of self, wandering around, eating whatever they wanted. And then all of a sudden they developed a conscience. And that's what happened, is they ate the fruit and they knew good from evil. An animal doesn't know good from evil. An animal only knows its needs and desires. The tiger doesn't eat you because it's mean. It eats you because its belly is empty.
And there's a purity in that.
Yeah, it's purely mechanical. I mean, it sucks for you either way, but For the tiger, the tiger has no idea that it is doing anything that is inappropriate. To the tiger, eating you is totally appropriate because he's at the top of the food chain. Right? We, on the other hand, most of us do not eat each other because we know that that's bad. And oftentimes we can't even articulate why that's bad. But we know that it's bad to chop up Jonathan and have him for dinner. Because Jonathan is a sentient being, and our conscience tells us that one does not devour sentient beings.
Is that helpful, Kitab? Does that take it full circle? Good.
Very helpful. Thank you very much.
Yeah. And you'll find, do you know the story of the churning of the ocean of milk?
Yes, the Samudra Manthan.
Yeah. That contains some of the same ideas. Because what you're looking for when you're churning the ocean of milk is the Amrit, right? That's what they were going for. And there was a lot of stuff in the way. So that will give you the same sense as the Garden of Eden story, and probably you can relate to it better.
Got it. Thank you.
And how would you define Amrit quickly for those who
the nectar of immortality.
Yes. It was like sacred fluid. How would I say this? Yeah. So, yep. Thanks.
All right. We managed to talk a lot.
Yay, we did it. We pulled through.
And Cherie needs to go to work. There's somebody there who desperately needs to be pummeled about furiously or something.
Therapeutically pummeled about, yes.
Yes.
Thank you everyone for being here, and we can go on Brady Bunch mode.
I will do that.
Yeah.
There we go.
All right. So thanks everyone for joining us for this series. And next week, I think we have a somewhat holiday appropriate topic coming up. We'll talk more about that next week.
The topic, though, we will tell you now, since you've stayed this long, the topic is going to be sacred hospitality, which historically has been one of the most important rules of society.
So I know I'm looking forward to that one.
Yeah.
In the meantime, we can wave to each other.
Bye, y'all.
And everyone watching on the replay, see you soon. Bye.
Take care. Bye.